Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're here to talk to you guys about the Winnipeg Jets, the recap of the season just gone, and then an outlook on the season upcoming. And so we'll jump straight into the recap. The Winnipeg Jets, I mean, they were probably one of the best teams in the league till right up around the All-Star break. They they didn't lose too much in overtime, which is probably where they lacked points, but they knew how to win games. However, once that All Stars break hit, they returned winning only 15 of their last 35 games, which ultimately put them in a terrible position come the end of the season, where they went from what everyone thought was a shoe in for, probably first or second in the division to barely scraping into the playoffs. So they ended up getting it done. They took the last wild card spot in the West, and they beat out Calgary and Nashville ultimately by 2 and 3 points respectively. But they definitely left it to the last few games, and I think there would have been a few tense moments in the Winnipeg camp at that point. They finished the season with 46 wins and 95 points. They only had the 3 overtime losses. So, as I said before, they didn't lose too many games in overtime. So, it was generally they were either winning it in regulation, or they were, if it went to overtime, they would lose in regulation, or if it went to overtime, they would ultimately win it. They were a pretty reasonable overtime team. I believe they won, 10 of 13 in overtime. So, I mean, pretty reasonable record there. But yeah, it was really strange. They were looking really good. Everything was looking great, and then all of a sudden the wheels fell off after the All-Star break, which for some teams it does happen. Some teams find they get a wind after the All-Star break. Other teams have a bit of a struggle to find their groove again, and that's sort of what happened to Winnipeg. They ultimately managed to pull it together enough and probably banked enough wins in the first part of the season to secure that playoff spot, but ultimately got absolutely trampled in the first round by the Vegas Golden Knights. They lost the series 4-1, albeit winning the first game reasonably comfortably as well. So, yeah, not a great season for the Winnipeg Jets. However, these things happen, and again, they gave themselves a shot by making the playoffs. It just obviously didn't happen for them, and they lose out to ultimately the team that won the Stanley Cup. So, pretty hard to argue with that. But yeah, that's pretty much the recap of the Winnipeg Jets 2022-23 season. And now I'm going to hand you off to Jaden to run you through the current projected lineups for the 23-24 season.
All right, so we just got about 3.8 million cap space. For forwards, Connor, Scheifele, and Ehlers, with Wheeler gone through the buyout. Got Iafallo Velarde brought in via that trade for Dubois, and then Niederreiter on that second. Perfetti, Lowry, and Appleton third. Nemestikov, Kupari, and Barron. Kupari being that another addition on that trade. Defenders, you got Morrissey, DeMello, Dylan, Pionk, Sandberg, and Schmidt. Very solid, at least top 4 decor there, and not too bad. I know Sandberg's on that 2-way contract, so they can do what they want, I believe. But not bad top 4 there. You got goalie, obviously Hellebuyck. Then they brought in 2 backups here in Brossoit and Delia. So depending what they do with the Hellebuyck situation, at least they have someone that can stand in. They're both kind of backups though, but Brossoit has had some decent numbers, even though he played 11 games last year. And then just for scratches, you got Johnson, Fujabi, sorry, Gustafson, Stanley, Harkins, and VL, someone else that also signed in. So not too bad. Obviously, a lot of notable, well, at least a big key notable losses here in Blake Wheeler and Dubois going out. I know, obviously, that locker room cancer. That's why you probably buy out the Wheeler and whatnot, and the age, and just going in different directions. It'll be interesting to see what they do with the Scheifele situation as well. Dubois, obviously wanted out. They got a fair haul for him. Obviously filling out that second line there for him. And then Gwanke to San Jose, home, Colorado, Coolman to New York Islanders, Limoges to Washington, Rittich to LA, and Stenlund to Florida. So a few notable losses there. Obviously the two big ones at the top, and they will be having 2.75 mil on that Blake Wheeler buyout just for this year and next year as well. But I don't think it's going to hurt them too badly. It'll just be that goal production that they'll be missing. Just maybe a couple notable things that they've got a few signings from last year's draft. Obviously, we'll have to see if Brad Lambert does come in at all. He didn't really perform at the AHL level, but he was destroying it in the WHL. So we'll see if he does play AHL this year and how he develops, and if he does step up later in the year. And yeah, I guess moving on to how this team is shaping out, it's actually not too bad, honestly. I don't mind it. I definitely see the holes where they've got to fix, and it's going to be a little bit hard to do it. But I don't mind the decor in a sense. Obviously, Hellebuyck's a good goalie, but you're going to have to do something with him going out if he does go out, which it looks like it's going to happen. So at least you want to get something in return. And their forward line, they got decent depth overall. At least nice first line. They've brought in basically a second line. It's just that bottom six that probably needs rounding out. So, and just probably depth in their scratches as well in regards to that. So yeah, it's just depth for me. I don't mind basically their top four and their top six. I feel like it can get the job done, but yeah, it's just their depth.
Yeah, I mean, when you let go of a player like Blake Wheeler and Dubois, I know a lot of people have their opinions and all the rest of that sort of stuff, but they are two quality players that they've lost. The good thing about the Dubois situation is that they actually got a return for him, compared to Wheeler, where it was just a straight buyout. So they were always going to have to reshuffle this lineup at some point, and there's going to be some chemistry issues with obviously Iafalo and Velarde coming in. However, if they happen to play on that second line together, as it states here, maybe that's what'll sort of help a bit of that chemistry and help them click a little bit quicker. Yeah, again, it's more the unknown. So I agree with you in the sense of the depth issues. Like Cole Perfetti, how's he going to go? He's got some real class about him, but he's yet to sort of break out into that player that I think a lot of people believe he's going to become. So it's going to be interesting to see what he does personally. And yeah, it's more about where they're going to sit come the start of the season. I feel like you've got this situation with Scheifele and Hellebuyck. I mean, that's got to put some weird tensions on it, right? Like Scheifele's looking like they're shopping him around. They're going to get rid of him at some point, and Hellebuyck is looking like he's going to be gone at some point. But are they going to start the season with Winnipeg? And what's that going to look like from a Winnipeg perspective? Because Hellebuyck's obviously made it known that he doesn't want to be there. Scheifele doesn't really want to be there. I don't think they want Scheifele there. So it's kind of a strange situation in a sense. Like you want to see Scheifele and Hellebuyck moved on before the start of the season, because I feel like them being there when the season starts is just going to be a distraction. It's not going to allow this team to gel with what it's going to be like going forward. And it could just put some tensions there as well. So I'm very interested to see what the Winnipeg management can do prior to the season, because I really think the big key here is to move those two players. But then again, like if Scheifele are gone, Hellebuyck's gone, cool. You've got Bourgeois, who I think, he can step up and be that main goalie. Whether or not he's going to be good enough is the other question, but at least they've got someone there. But it's the question about the number one center. All of a sudden, depending on what your return is for Hellebuyck and Scheifele, whether or not you're just getting all prospects or whether you're actually getting a player who can play. But are you going to get a top six center? Like, are you going to get a first or second line center in return for either one of these players? And if not, they go into the season literally with Velarde as their number one center, which all of a sudden raises some real alarms with me, because I just look at it and go, yeah, I just don't think that's going to get it done. I think that would be really lacking. Again, though, Perfetti might really step up this year, and he might take that next step, which I think everyone's hoping for. Brad Lambert, as you mentioned, he's been spoken about quite a lot, and he probably fell a lot further than some people thought he would. I think there was some questions around his attitude, but I tell you what, if this kid can have a really strong camp and make a case, there's no real reason not to test him out, because he's quite a talented young player. So if you can get him in the lineup, and maybe he fills in one of those center roles that might be lacking once Scheifele's gone. But it'd be really interesting in what they do. I think this team should look completely different by the time the season starts, with Hellebuyck and Scheifele out. But the big question to whether or not I believe that these guys can compete this year is going to come down to what they get in return, and whether it's a help them now return, or whether it's a prospects help them down the line. And I think if it's a prospects help them down the line, I think that would pretty much put a line through Winnipeg, in my opinion, for the 2023-24 season.
Well, I think it has to be, in a sense, because the teams that you're looking at, they want Hellebuyck, aren't going to be offering like a first line center for it. So, especially for a 1 year UFA. So, yeah, it is really that depth issue. It'll be interesting if they do move out Scheifele before, trade deadline halfway through the season, because they've already lost 2 out of their 4 top goal scorers in Dubois and Wheeler. Dubois with 27, Wheeler with 16. They only had 3 players over 20 goals. Obviously, they bring in Velarde, who scored 23 last year. So that kind of replaces a little bit the Wheeler Dubois side of things. Just maybe just the Dubois side. But if you do lose Scheifele, who was your leading goal scorer at 42, that's 3 out of 4 of your goal scoring, and they already got goal scoring problems. They had a poor power play, in a sense. I can't remember what it was ranked. It was like 21st or something like that. And they had a really good PK. That was one of the good things that they did have going. Power play at 23rd, PK 7th on the right side there. And then you can see here goals for per game at 3, which is alright, but it was 21st in the league. And then the goals against was 10th best in the league. So clearly, defensive side of things, obviously, because you do have that Hellebuyck, that you're keeping it better than average on the defensive side, but they are just lacking goal scoring. And now they've already lost 2 out of 3 of their goal scorers, like I said. If you do lose Scheifele, their depth doesn't have it to get this goal scoring. I think their 4th line didn't score over 10. None of them are over 10 goals. Even some of their 3rd liners, Appleton and Perfetti, I know they basically played half seasons, but they didn't score over 10 goals either. And, with a full season, you could expect that maybe, but it's just there's not enough depth on scoring there. And I don't see it coming from the D line that you're going to get it from. And yeah, that is just my biggest issue. You got to score goals to win, and I don't see how this team is going to go around scoring goals. And
if they lose Hellebuyck as well, like you talk about the thing that probably won them a lot of games last season, and was that defense, and the ability to not concede as many goals. You lose Hellebuyck, and all of a sudden that probably starts to go in the opposite direction. So we already know, by looking at the players they've lost in Wheeler, Dubois, Scheifele probably out the door, that goal scoring is probably like that. Goals 4 of 3 a game is potentially going to head on the way down, and you lose Hellebuyck, and that goals against is potentially going on the way up. So yeah, unless you're sort of seeing some big seasons come from, maybe Kapari, Perfetti, depends on how Velarde, he is quite young. Velarde can sort of meld in this Winnipeg side. If you see some big seasons from them, you might get enough from them to replace what they've lost. But again, Dubois, I know there was a lot of issues, his attitude, all the rest of that sort of stuff. Like, maybe he'll find whatever he's looking for in LA, but obviously it's been a real weird journey for him considering how good of a player he is. But that's the thing, he is such a good player. Like, you're not just getting rid of him because he's a shit bloke or whatever. Um, you're getting rid of a really good player, and it's not like you can just replace those. So, Iafalo and Velarde, reasonable return for him, and if Kupari can do something, you might get a little bit of the way there to replacing him, but ultimately, massive loss.
Mm.
And I don't think that this team is better than last season, and we saw the dramatic sort of drop off that they had. I think, I'm not saying that they lost that Dubois trade. I think the return was there, but I just don't think that it necessarily makes them better. Especially if they lose Hellebuyck and Scheifele, it doesn't make them better right now. So unless they sort of get, right now players in return, but as you said, who's taking Connor Hellebuyck and sending, good players back in return? Like, it's probably not happening. It's probably going to be prospects and draft picks. And same for Scheifele. I think anyone who's taking him as UFA this year is most likely sending back prospects and draft picks. So yeah, I just don't see this team getting better than what it was last season, and they only just scraped through.
Yeah.
So I think it's
Well,
it's going to be
the
a
goal
down
scoring
season.
issues, I'm really actually surprised they didn't get Tarasenko when he was available, because just pure goal scorer in a sense. I feel like that's kind of what this team sort of needed, because defensive side of things. Obviously, Cheveldayoff, his work's not done. In my opinion, like, you look at all their goalies are UFAs, so that's not a
Mm.
sign of building a core for success. You got two of your top 4D UFAs, and then you got two top 6 players UFAs. One of them being your number one center, and it's looking like obviously you're departing ways with him. So a lot of this core is on the out. You've already moved two big pieces. With the pieces they've added, it's kind of a weird little window. Like, I like the Velarde and Kupari and whatnot, and Iafallo, but Iafallo obviously being only 2 years, it's kind of an interesting window they're putting themselves in to go for it. And obviously you got Kyle Connor there for 3 more years, you got Ehlers for 2, so I'm guessing they're going to try and compete for the next 2 or 3, because they have those players. But I don't know how you're going to do it when you do move out Hellebuyck, you do move out Scheifele, and then can you re-sign DeMello, Dylan, etc. That is my worry with this team, is just building that core for the future. Because once again, you got two goalies there, all both on 1 years, so they need to find that number one goalie. Hopefully either now with the Hellebuyck trade or halfway through the season in the trade deadline, but they need to kind of find someone to go in that direction. Just interesting things that the team had to work on last year. Like, they were just conceding too many shots and not putting enough on. Obviously, they did not score enough goals, and they weren't putting enough shots in to do that. They were 22nd in shooting percentage of unblocked shots, so pretty weak shots in that regard. They were the 9th for most giveaways in the league, or equal 9th with Ottawa. So that's kind of where they were at in regards to giveaways. It's pretty poor. 27th in the league in shots blocked. So their players were not putting the body on the line, and basically, that whole leaving Hellebuyck to dry thing is pretty much standard for him there. And then, like we mentioned, just clearing out the cancer room, the cancer locker room. They've done half of that. Probably need 1 or 2 more pieces to go to fully complete that, and then you build up a new system and good little environment for the depth of the kids to grow into. But yeah, my big issue is they don't have the scoring. If they lose Scheifele, that's 3 out of 4 of your big scorers from last year, and all you've done is really added Velarde. I know IFLO can do it, but he's not really like someone I'd be like expecting big things from in that respect. And I, looking at their depth, I don't see who's gonna come in through a prospect to pull it in this year anyway. Maybe in the future, but not this year. So yeah, it really, like you said, it all depends on the Hellebuyck and Scheifele or whoever else they move returns. They do have 3.8 mil to work with, and those two free up another 12. So 15 all up is pretty good overall. They could easily retain half their salaries because they're only 1 year.
Yeah, I mean, given how deep we are in, yeah, because they don't obviously need defense in a sense, so they're not going to go after like a Matt Dumba or someone like that. That's going to cost you some cap space, but there's not a huge amount left in the free agency market. So I wouldn't be surprised if to get these deals done and get a little bit more for them that they were to wear, half of Scheifele and half of Hellebuck's contract, because at the end of the day, you get 6 mil back in your pocket, you get and you know and you retain 6 mil just for the season. So like it's not like it's long term, and they're probably not going to need that cap space either this season. Um, and also, I mean, you get towards the end of the season, $6 million extra in the cap. Come deadline, if you do need to make some trades for whatever, because you are in the hunt for the playoffs, that'll be plenty for that situation. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a retained salary for those two players, just to try and get something back in return for retaining that salary. But yeah, it's hard to see. Like, obviously the Velarde situation's good. He's an RFA. He's young. He's 23. That was a big reason why they got him in the trade. Iafalo, I think, was just one of those that he's got the potential. He's going to put up 15 goals probably in the season. He's good for 2 years. If nothing comes of this team, they can always trade him out at the deadline, because he will always get you something in return. My worry for them is, yeah, Kyle Connor and Ehlers, like, they're in that perfect age window, right? Like 26 and 27 years old. They're two phenomenal players. And you're probably not going to be competing. So, what comes of these guys? Ehlers out of contract next season. So he's only got the 2 years left. And Kyle Connor, as you said, with the 3, I can't see them doing it. Like, yeah, they might prove us wrong. Like, they might be phenomenal this year and make the playoffs. But I just can't see it. So I'm expecting to see the likes of Niederreiter, DeMello, and Dylan on the trade table at trade deadline.
Yeah, or
Honestly,
I feel like they've got to go for it just because of those Connor and Ehlers. Otherwise, you're full rebuild, and you're probably looking with how much is coming out of this team. Then you would have to move, the Pionks and whatnot, because they only got 2 years left. Like, there's not much when it comes to term on this team. I think the longest is Morrissey at 28 there, ending in 2028. So everything else is basically a 3-year contract or less. And so basically, if you do a full rebuild, basically this whole team in 3 years won't be here, is what I'm getting at. And that's my worry. So I feel like they do have to go for it in a sense. Like, they've been mid-table for how many years now? It's been crazy. They were good at, probably 5+ years ago. They were like very decent, but they've been pretty mid-table for as long as I can remember now. And I just think it's just goal scoring. Like, I don't mind the defense. There's like a lot of money on that defense. If you did stay with Hellebuyck halfway through the season, I don't mind it. I wouldn't even mind just sitting on a Brossois for the season and get a goalie somewhere down the line. And I would just like to see some depth players in regards to goal scoring that could maybe play a power play. Like, I don't know, I'd take a bet on like players like Pujavi or something, like, basically 1 year, 2 year bets that, hey, if their careers rebounds, this good for us. They're young. We can do long-term deals. So those are the kind of bets and gambles that this team's kind of got to have to make to see if it can turn around. Have that
Well, they got
breakout
to do something,
player. Mm.
right? They've got to do something because I don't see. Yeah, I just don't see where they're going to get that sort of improvement from. Like we said, Perfetti, he's young, he's talented. They might get it there. Velarde might take that next step. So there's a couple of players where they could get it, but yeah, you kind of like Nemishnikov. It's just he's been around the league. He's gone from team to team. Like I just don't see or expect him to be a player. Like, is he really worth having on that fourth line? Like, yeah,
Well,
I
they just
mean,
signed him, didn't they? So I guess they think
well,
so.
they did. They got him last season, obviously at the back end, and then they signed him for 2 years, which is crazy. And as you said, this whole team could be different in come the end of next season because you've got this season obviously Scheifele, Niederreiter, DeMello, Dylan, Hellebuck, Brossois, Delia, who are all UFAs. And then next season you've got Pionk, Schmidt, Appleton, Ehlers, Iafalo, Nemishnikov. Like it's a whole team. Like I get you can re-sign players, but if they don't make the playoffs this season,
Mm. Well,
I dare say that they're not going to let those players go for free. So they're going to get rid of those current UFAs, which I don't think will put them in a position to compete the year after, which means you're going to be just trading all of those players out. So I really do think that, come the end of the 2025 season, this team is going to look completely different and they're going to probably be heading down the rebuild heading down
yeah.
for a rebuild.
Well, I think it's disappointing because I actually really like the Jets. I love the logo.
Mm.
I just love the organization, the team, the fans. I love watching it. So I'm a little disappointed that it's
Kyle Connor's fantastic, and
going
so's
down this
Ehlers.
path. But
Yeah.
it's just this market is such a hard place to promote because of how cold it is over there. And then you're in Canada where obviously you got different tax laws that make it harder compared to somewhere like Florida. So it's really hard to promote this team if you're not going to be competing at the top.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's where they're just sitting in this limbo for a long time now. But obviously, like Shovel Day off, like one of his key thing was getting rid of the locker cancer, and Wheeler has been bought out. Scheifele most likely on the move, and then this Hellebuck probably I'm pretty sure just wants to go back to US anyway. So once that's sorted, you're in a new era, a new generation, and I just don't want to see him finish mid-table again because like they've been getting mid-table draft picks as well for the last few years. Obviously number 14 with McGrady last year. Then you got Barlow this year at number 18. So obviously they did have Brad Lambert last year, which is 30. So really late first round pick. But there's no top end, real high talent unless they're scouting has picked up some really good little late bloomers. That there is no sort of Connor McDavid or any sort of thing coming through for this team. I know you're not pretty going to get a Connor McDavid, but my point is you're not going to get a first line center in a sense.
There's no first line center. Yeah, exactly. Right. Like, I mean, Brad Lambert has been touted as potentially being that player. I definitely think he's the top six, but like it's when you're picking that late, the likelihood of them coming through obviously dwindles away. And yeah, you're right. Like, if this team isn't competitive and they finish like, I mean, isn't competitive in the sense that it doesn't ever look like they're going to make the playoffs, and even if they did sneak in, they're not going to do anything. It's one of those questions that you're like, well, you're going to finish mid-table again and get pick 12, when realistically you probably need to be picking inside the top 10. So yeah, I'd like for them to prove me wrong, but I really do think that we're going to see these guys fall quite significantly. They might be competitive in the sense of they might compete for a wild card spot, but I just don't think they're going to get it. And I think we're going to
Oh yeah,
see those UFAs traded out, and then I think the season after you're going to see those UFAs traded out, and I really do think they're going to go down that rebuild, unless Nicolas Ehlers resigns. He's going to find that you're going to find him on his way out, and then probably Kyle Connor the year after as well. I'd love for both of those two players to sign. They're probably around that age that they could and be still a reasonable age by the time they come out of a rebuild. They'd probably be just in their 30s. So it just depends on whether or not they want to, tough it through that rebuild. I guess that's up to management to convince them that it's worth staying. But other than those two, you're probably thinking that everyone else will probably be moved on for that rebuild, and that's just where I think they'll head. I don't think that this team can win a cup, and I don't think that they're going to even make playoffs. So for me, I think it's going to be a downward spiral for them over the next couple of years, and they'll eventually start that rebuild and really clear house for prospects and picks.
yeah. Well, they're going to compete against Colorado, Dallas, and Minnesota. So those three are probably still your top staple three in that division. You got Nashville on the rebound, even though they're going through this semi-retool rebuild, but they brought in a really good head coach, and now they got a really good GM head coach as well. So you got St. Louis that could easily do a rebound compared to last year, and probably the two bottomer teams, Arizona and Chicago. But those two teams are getting really good youngsters depth in that regard.
Yep.
So I can see them fighting for a wild card this year, but it's going to be a tough slog. Last year, only 4 of those 8 teams were plus minus. It was either you're over a plus 20 in goal differential or in the negatives, and Winnipeg was in the plus 20s, and then it was number 5 Nashville at -9. So I just don't know where they're going to get the goal scoring from. I think they will address that in the trades to come, in my opinion, because I don't think you could look at this team as a GM and go, yeah, this is it. Our power play is going to be fine. It won't be 23rd again. Like there's not much that's been added here to prove otherwise. Don't mind the defense. And I don't mind the PK. Obviously, it's going to be a little bit different with Hellebuyck, and your numbers are probably going to look worse if and when he does go. But yeah, I just want to see that goal scoring, and I'm a little disappointed they didn't bring in a Tarasenko or any of those type of signings throughout the off season just to add into it, because they do have a few playmakers here, or defensive forwards, I guess you could say, but there's no like players like Ovechkin or whatnot, or just pure offense. So
I just think it's a hard place to convince people to go at the moment with everything going on at Winnipeg.
Yeah.
Obviously, the locker room cancer situation that's being spoken about. No one really wants to head to a team in that position. And once you start seeing certain players head out, and then you start to look at the team and you go, is that quality? Like a Tarasenko is going to be looking to go to teams that he thinks is on the way up, not on the way down.
100%.
So,
but I'm just saying, you got to ring the phone.
Oh yeah, and I'm sure they did. I'm sure they would have given a call to him or his agent. Although he fired his entire agent team and stuff, but I'm sure that phone call would have come through. It's just it's going to be difficult for this team to sort of convince anyone like that to come on board at this moment. Unfortunately for them, and that's why I know it's doom and gloom. I don't want to be doom and gloom about it, but I just think I think time's up for the Winnipeg Jets, and we're going to be seeing them head in that rebuild direction either the end of this year or the following season.
Yeah, I personally would strive for that retool, just because of the Kalkona Ehlers. Like, I feel like that's your core, and you could build around that pretty quickly.
I mean, if they sign, they would speed that rebuild up tremendously, 100%. But, and that's what I was saying before, like if you could convince them to stay, they're probably young enough to, do that with. However,
Yeah.
it comes on to
I'm just saying,
management
like,
then.
I feel like you could retool after this year if you'd played your cards right. Like, you look at this team, there's no bad contracts, like egregious contracts. There's no Eric Carlson's on this team. Like, there's nothing
Mm,
like a Darnell Nurse, like something you go, oh my god, we can't even move it. Like
mm.
everything's either movable or like you could live with in a sense. And
Or
obviously,
expiring
yeah,
as
or
well.
expiring. So I feel like this is a team with a really good GM. You could easily retool this in a year or two, and that leaves you in the window for the Ehlers and Kyle Connor. And I feel like this is the route he's going. Chevadeoff. I think that's what he is doing, what he's aiming for, and I feel like that's the right move. It's just you've got to make a lot of moves, and a lot of them got to pan out, and you probably got to do kind of like a little Vegas Golden Knights thing, and you get these people that were having poor seasons, and you come to your team, and they just rebound their careers all of a sudden, and that's kind of the culture and system they need to bring in. And I feel like they can do it once Scheifele is gone, because I feel like he's pretty much the last, um, lock of cancer there. You move him, I feel like you can build something brand new and change that environment. So I don't want to see what they get for Hellebuck, but my important one to see what happens is with Scheifele and when they move him, if they can. So that's the big one. And if they don't,
Mm.
then obviously their season's probably written off. And yeah,
Yeah, no, I mean, only time will tell, right? It'll be interesting. Um, yeah, it's hard because you if they don't get rid of Shifley now, you're teetering with the trade deadline situation. If they're in a playoff spot, do you trade him out or do you keep him? Because if you trade him out, you potentially lose your playoff spot. If you keep him, you lose him for nothing. So I hope they can get rid of him before the season starts because I feel like that will give this team some clarity. But
mm,
yeah, I mean, we'll see if they can do it the way you think it will happen with the retool. Um, that'd be ideal, honestly. I just can't see it happening, unfortunately, for him. But yeah, like I said, only time will tell, and we'll have to wait and see.
yeah. Like I said, I think it's doable. Just last thing I was just going to note is with regards to the contracts, there's only one player with a no move clause, and that's Morrissey. So everyone else has like a modified no trade clause, and I think that's what they've done as well. Well, is they haven't locked themselves down on contracts.
Mm.
Granted, they did buy out Wheeler. That was the only other one. So yeah, I just thought I'd give the tops off for that as well because you can see throughout the league on other teams where pretty much a lot of the top core is just locked down no matter how good or bad it looks. But yeah, that was just my other shout out to good management by Winnipeg. Alrighty, if that's it there, no problem. We'll end it there. Feel free to like the video, comment below on what you think of the Winnipeg, if they're going to go for the full rebuild or they're going to try and do this sort of retooling thing they're going to go for. And yeah, don't forget to subscribe, all notifications on. And until the next video, guys, we'll catch you then.
See you later, guys.